Најголемиот воен пакт на светот, НАТО, Алијансата, прославува 75 години постоење. На самитот во Вашингтон отпатува и македонска делегација, но интерес за македонските прашања речиси и нема. Фокусот на НАТО самитот е секако војната во Украина. Во меѓувреме на европско тло избори имаше во Велика Британија, каде премиерот дојде од редот на лабористите и веќе ја презема функцијата. Во Франција пак заврши и вториот изборен круг. Иако се очекуваше партијата, крајната десница, партијата на Ле Пен, да избие на првото место, како што тоа беше случај во првиот изборен круг, тоа не се случи. И со голем пресврт левицата изби на првото место. Во овој лавиринт одиме во Вашингтон и Париз. Новите македонски челници, предводени од ВМРО ДПМН, прв пат на НАТО самит, откако државава е влезена во Алијансата. На самитот во Вашингтон фокусот беше ставен секако на војната со Украина, на руската агресија, на помагачите на Русија, но и на она што се случува внатре кај веројатно најмоćната членка на НАТО алијансата, тоа се Соединетите Американски држави. Нашите политичари, предводени од премиерот Мицкоски, одржаа низа средби во Вашингтон, а премиерот Мицкоски присуствуваше и на вечера во Белата куќа. Иако наголемо се велеше, односно се шпекулираше дека е возможно на маргините на самитот да се оствари средба помеѓу двајцата премиери, македонскиот и грчкиот, Мицкоски и Мицотакис, тоа сепак не се случи. Од друга страна, пак од изјавите во медиумите можевме да го слушнеме новиот бугарски премиер како изјави дека остварил неколку средби и разговарал со своите македонски колеги. Сосема известно дека таква средба нема да се случи, бидејќи новинарските информации кои доаѓаат токму од новинарските кулуари велат дека тие прашања, поврзани со македонските билатерални договори за Европската Унија и за НАТО алијансата, се веќе затворени прашања. И токму затоа фокусот го ставаат на отворените војни. Од Вашингтон ја вклучувам мојата колешка од Романија, Cristina Cileacu, која го следи тој самит од почеток, е таму во Вашингтон и се јавува во Лавиринт со еден извештај од атмосферата, но и за она што беа главните пораки од самитот. Cristina, thank you very much for joining me from Washington in my show Lavirint. Thank you so much. I know you have a lot of work and you're busy during the summit. Thanks again for finding time to talk to me. So let's start with what was going on in these past few days in Washington. What were the keynotes during the summit? We heard from the media that the focus was Ukraine and the war in Ukraine and the Russian aggression there.
Pleasure to be with you, Cristina. Thank you for this invitation. Indeed, in Washington, the main focus is and was Ukraine for these days of the anniversary summit of the North Atlantic Alliance. To quote the Secretary General that held yet another press conference yesterday evening, because the Secretary General being in charge of hosting the summit, he basically talks with media every day for a few times a day. He said, the aid for Ukraine is the most urgent task at this summit. So everything happening at the anniversary NATO summit here in Washington has anything to do with helping Ukraine, but not only Ukraine, also enhancing the 360 air degrees defense of NATO, especially air defense. And when we talk about that, we talk about mainly the eastern flank being so close to Ukraine and being closer to Russia. The fact that Russia remains the most major threat for everyone here in the alliance, and the fact that let's not forget and to repeat over and over again that Russia started the war in Ukraine, and there seems to be no intention to stop it so far. So coming back to Washington, the leaders are intention is to help Ukraine even more, to show that NATO still stands with Ukraine as long as it takes, and more than that, because today we also have the final declaration of the NATO summit. There are a lot of points making references to helping Ukraine. And also it's a personal dream of Secretary Stoltenberg, because he will be ending this year his 10 years long mandate as Secretary General of NATO. He is intending to have a pledge for fund for Ukraine. Each of the allies member should apply to this fund according to their own PIB, but also to take into account the fact that each of us contributed to helping Ukraine and helping more Ukraine. So it's a lot about Ukraine. President Zelensky was also here. Let's not forget that at the beginning of this summit, Vladimir Putin and the Russians attacked children's hospital in Kiev, and that was stated in many declarations here, was condemned here in Washington, and also by, of course, President Zelensky.
When we talk about Putin, he is in his diplomatic search for new alliances. So he met also with Chinese official, with Hungarian official, with Serbian here. But what I had occasion to hear from your reportings there is that Stoltenberg also addressed China as an issue, and he said that it is a decisive enabler of the war. So what are the talks and the keynotes about China's influence in the war in Ukraine?
You are right. China is also mentioned in the final declaration here in the summit of Washington, saying that China is indeed the main enabler. A power like China should not enable the war, more war in Europe, is part of this quote in the final declaration of the summit in Washington. And of course, China remains the systemic challenger for NATO, because China now is much more present even in Europe. Let's not forget that in these days, while in Washington the allies have the summit in Belarus, China brought some of its military to have exercises, common exercises with the Belarusian army. So China and this partnership without limits, as we remember, both Vladimir Putin and the Chinese President Xi Jinping called their friendship, is something that actually helps Russia to keep more of the war. And not only China, unfortunately, is not mentioned yet in the final declaration here in Washington, but India is also a country that helps quite a lot the struggle of Russia to maintain this war by supporting its economy. And we can understand the play of India, but then again, we cannot agree with the play of India. So it's a lot of coming and going in this regard, because let's not forget, NATO is the strongest alliance that could be at this moment in the planet Earth. And in the same time, we have on the other side of the world, we have Russia plus China, plus Iran, plus North Korea, that wants to step on all the values that NATO believes in and all the values that all the allies support.
Christina, before the summit, Hungarian Prime Minister, he went to the tour. He actually tried to impose himself as a peace solver, peace bringer, or war solver. However, he went to visit the President Zelensky in Kiev, and then he went to visit President Putin. So, is there any talks during the summit about his behavior between NATO member representatives who are there on the forum, how they actually see on these moves, on Orban's moves?
They don't like it, and they mention it because even at during this summit, Viktor Orban, this time with the voice of his foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó, mentioned that Ukraine does not belong in NATO. On the other hand, we see in the final declaration of the summit here in Washington that all the allies supported the idea of the irreversible way of Ukraine towards NATO. Viktor Orban effect of a pacifier, and I quote unquote on that, is that after his visit in Moscow, Putin attacked child hospital in Kiev. So that's the influence of Viktor Orban when it comes to making peace in Ukraine, when it comes to stopping Putin to keep on attacking Ukraine. So Viktor Orban has no influence, to make it brief and to make it clear. And when it comes to the alliance, all the allies underline his role that basically didn't bring any good to anything. And more than that, Viktor Orban is still defying everyone, because after the NATO summit will be ending, on Monday in the United States, the Republican convention is starting in order to nominate Donald Trump as the Republican candidate for the president of the United States. But Donald Trump is meeting Orban on Tuesday, so immediately after this important Republican convention, simply because Viktor Orban wants to underline more and more that he is the one of the EU leaders that likes the vision of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has its own vision when it comes to Ukraine about how this war should end. Most of the allies here do not agree with Mr. Trump visions, and Donald Trump also brings today something new to the allies' attention, saying that if he becomes president of the United States, we know already that he is not a big fan of the North Atlantic Alliance. One of the measures he intends to do is to share with the allies less and less intelligence information. And we do remember how important are the intelligence coming from the United States. Only if we think of the days before the Russians started the war in Ukraine, when the entire planet basically found out from the US intelligence services that the Russians are going to create this attack. So that would be a big blow for the alliance if Trump is going to do this to make it a real thing. If, of course, first of all, he has to take over the job of the president for the second mandate.
Christina, I want to ask you some informations about my country, about North Macedonia. The delegations and the leaders are using the summit to make connections, to make new connections, to straighten the old connections they have throughout meetings all day long. So we were speculating here in Macedonia and in Greece as well whether there will be unofficial meeting between our leader Mitsotakis and Greek leader Mitsotakis. So did that happen? What are your informations saying about this possible meeting?
Anything is possible at the NATO summit, because you are perfectly right. The leaders are here. They are in the same room, and a bilateral meeting could happen anytime, even if it's not on the original agenda. For the moment, as far as I know, because I asked around, apparently there was not such a meeting, but the day here in Washington, while we do this broadcast, is barely starting. So it's the last day of the summit and could be such a meeting today. But what I want to mention when it comes to the Western Balkans, because this region is extremely important, and I guess being a journalist from Romania, I know a little better about this region because Romania is a big supporter of the Western Balkans. NATO declaration summit also involves a specific point addressed to the Western Balkans, saying how important is this region and saying that NATO wants to enlarge itself with countries from this region, from this area, simply because it cannot be a gap when it comes to Europe and when it comes to, as I said, this 360 degrees air defense of Europe and the North Atlantic Alliance. So the Western Balkans are important also for NATO. Let's just hope that there will be a meeting between the North Macedonian leader and the leader of Greece here in Washington. For the moment, I have no idea if this happened, but fingers crossed.
That's right. We are the youngest member of the NATO alliance. And Cristina, I want to ask you, because we mentioned all the meetings, but there were meetings and dinners on the highest level. The American President Biden, he invited all the leaders to dinner at the White Palace. So what was going on? What was the sayings in journalist circles after this dinner with all of the leaders hosted in the White House?
Yeah, well, it was, as you know, probably, and the people of North Macedonia also know, this summit was also about the candidacy of the Joe Biden for the second mandate of the president, because after his debate with Donald Trump, the Democrats are kind of worried about the state of health of President Biden. Therefore, this summit, during this summit, President Biden is under a very detailed scrutiny of the American media, first of all, but not only of the American media. The entire world is watching Joe Biden to see if he's still able to keep this job and to have a second mandate. At the White House, and not only at the White House, here at the summit as well, Joe Biden was so far the perfect host. He made jokes. He even watched some football with the new British Prime Minister. They talked about other type of topics, less political and more human, I would say. And the media was also present. Not all of us, unfortunately, because the White House is not as big as we would like to be. But the media present there reported about having a nice atmosphere and everyone getting along with everyone. So for the moment, these are the news. And today, also, Joe Biden is going to be under a very attentive observation, especially from the American media, because he's going to hold a press conference. Only the American journalists are allowed to attend this conference. And this, they say, is the most important press conference he had in this mandate, simply because his behavior here kind of determine if he will be supported still in the race for the second mandate in the White House or not. So we will see. We'll be here in Washington and watch it, and we'll keep you posted as well in North Macedonia.
Thank you very much, Cristina. Just one more question at the end, because you mentioned also Biden's candidacy. Before the summit, the Secretary General, Mr. Stoltenberg, first went to visit Pentagon and the Secretary of Defense of United States. Maybe is that visit about this kind of concerns?
Everything is about this kind of concern, because it was a vivid debate here at Washington during the summit, the fit state of the health state of President Biden. But then again, when it comes to NATO, to the alliance, because all the journalists present here from all the countries asked not only their leaders present in Washington, but also Secretary General Stoltenberg when we had the chance, how NATO will look if Joe Biden will no longer be president of the United States and Donald Trump becomes president of the United States. And all the answers coming from our national leaders or the Secretary General were pretty much the same. Nobody is worried because what actually this summit here in Washington did was to be ready to prepare the alliance for a possible reinstallation of Donald Trump at the White House. Nobody knows. The elections are in November and nobody knows the results. Polls show something today and something tomorrow. So only the American citizens will decide who is going to be their next president. But in the meantime, everyone is taking measures of keeping everything ongoing and keeping everything ongoing and very hard to be disabled or destroyed. So when it comes to the health of President Biden, it's completely up to him. But when it comes to NATO, everyone took all the necessary measures to have the alliance as safe and stable and powerful as it is right now.
Cristina Cileacu from Romania, currently in Washington. Thank you very much for this report. I leave you now to do your busy schedule and other live callings. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Cristina.
На овие теми за тоа како ќе се соочува Франција со предизвиците, но и зошто се случија овие избори и ваков резултат. Разговарам со советникот на еден од пратениците од редовите од партијата на Макрон, тоа е Матиас Васкес, кој има големо искуство и со работа на Балканот, бидејќи претходно бил овде на мисии во неколку балкански држави. Од студиото на Медија Так се селиме во Париз. Mr. Vasquez, thank you very much for accepting this interview. These days, these past few weeks or maybe months, it was very interesting to follow up the politics in France. So you had elections during the first round. Everything looked like the far right is going to win the election. They came out first after the first cycle, but there was a huge turnover in the second cycle of the voting, and actually the far right from the first place they went down to the third place. So first of all, I would like to ask how this happened. What happened in that period of time between two election cycles to have this kind of turnover or this kind of change?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank you for having me, and it's very interesting to discuss about that because it's a very brand new situation for us. And I would like to first introduce myself, of course. So I'm a parliamentary collaborator of French member of the Parliament, the National Assembly, from the Macron's party, Renaissance. Since 4 years, and before that I was living in North Macedonia in the international cooperation field, and also I founded the French Macedonia Association while I was there. So I'm very glad to express my views for your channel. So actually, yeah, what you mentioned is the big surprise of this election. So the first surprise was, of course, the dissolution that our President Emmanuel Macron decided on the 9th of June at the night of the results of the European elections. So he wanted to give democratic respiration to clarify the situation. And what we see is that I don't know if the situation is clarified. It is clarified because French people voted, so they expressed what they would like. But at the same time, this leads in a very new and, if I may say, innovative situation of our parliament, because right now we have like 3 big blocks, as you say. That's the outcome of the election. So left, a coalition, central coalition, and extreme right, plus then right. bloc. So actually, yes, the surprise was from the second round, and this is the result of what we call the Republican Front, which means that due to the rise of the Marine Le Pen's party, which is extreme right, and many candidates that arrived in the third position decided not to maintain themselves for the second round. And this is how we vote here. Actually, each MP is representing his or her constituency. So we have 577 constituencies, which is 577 MPs. And each constituency has its own specific case. So in the case of a party member from the left coalition or the central coalition coming on the third position, he was supposed to retire for the second round. So that's what happened in, let's say, most of the cases. So that is why actually Marine Le Pen's candidates did not manage to arrive at the issue after the second round as high as it was expected, because it is notable to see that her party got 11 million votes, which is historically high and which is like top votes of the country. But because of the management, the electoral system and rules for these parliamentary elections, she has not been able to overcome the issue of the voting system. Despite the fact that her party is still #1 in the French parliament, it is not the first coalition. That's notable because we work for the elections within coalitions, but then when the parliament is functioning, we work with groups, right? So that is like the current discussion that we're having at the parliament is which group will have each seats at the parliament. So we have discussions currently at the parliament, and right now, like Marine Le Pen's group is clear. We have the list, so they are about 145. And then the central group, which is belonging to Emmanuel Macron's analiza, is still discussing, but they won about 165 seats in total. And then the left coalition is also discussing about their groups, and they won about 185 seats. So that's where we stand right now.
So tell me, during this period, there were many protests throughout France, especially after European elections, when they ended and when Mr. Macron brought this decision to go on new elections. There were protests in France people who don't want the far right to take over. So what are the biggest fears or the biggest concerns of French people concerning the far right?
Yeah, that is very, very true. And because Marine Le Pen's party is constituted by her heritage from her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen. And this party has been founded like decades ago by very extreme or even racist people at that time, but she has been trying to modify to create a new party which will be more Republican, if I may say, more able to govern. And she has been working during decades, during maybe this last 20 years, to make it more acceptable to the people, let's say, more realistic and less extremist, if I may say. So she has been working on that quite fairly because, like, no, many people, 11 million people, once again, voted for her party, which is historical. But we still have like this historical reasons of having extreme right party at the power, and that leads back to the Second World War, of course. That was the last time. And in the meantime, we've seen like so many cases of racist interviews, candidates, and even during these elections, we saw a candidate of Marine Le Pen's party wearing a Nazi helmet, for example. She said that it was a joke and stuff, but like this means that still there are concerns of having racist and xenophobic people belonging to these people, even though Marine Le Pen says it's not the case, but we saw candidates in this election. It is still the case, actually. So that is why so many people are fearing of seeing Marine Le Pen's party and maybe her during the next presidential elections in power. So that's why so many people decided to go in the street and protest against this turnout, because like many people, let's say, now believe that actually she is able to govern and she is a respectable party. So this is the view of each of the of course, but that explains the demonstrations in that period, yes.
So what about the public opinion at the moment, after the second cycle of elections? I guess there is no protest at the moment. Am I right? So what was the public speech, the public discourse after the second round of election? What was the analysis in media? Was that greeted by the majority of French people?
Yes. So let's say that there were also concerns, of course, on the extreme left coalition as well, because one party, which is La France Insoumise, led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, is very extreme left, and it was belonging to this left coalition. And also there have been like some cases of anti-Semitism speeches and actions in this party. So some people were also fearing La France Insoumise leading power as well, or at least getting high in the seats. So the fear is in both sides. I would like to mention that. Otherwise, about the public opinion and expression and reactions right now that the election is done, is that once again we can consider that we have three almost equal blocks, which is absolutely new to our country. And our constitution wasn't made, our institutions were not made for that. It's always been like in North Macedonia, working with left and right. Then Emmanuel Macron's leading presidentials in 2027 changed the rule, even though he had a majority, even though in 2022 he had a relative majority, we've been more or less able to function as such. But right now we have three blocks. So we do not know exactly how to function, because that means that if not a single party or group got the absolute majority or even relative majority, close to the absolute majority, which is 289 seats, this means that they will need to discuss and to make compromises between each other. So that's what I think like people would expect, is that this election is the outcome of a really very historically high level of participation. So we have here, let's say, a very clear view, and that's maybe the clarification that Emmanuel Macron was expecting. We have a clear view of the political field situation, representation of France, right? So as you can see, it's quite diverse. It's quite eclectic, if I may say. So what people expect now is for all the selected people and groups to work together. At the same time, it's very surprising because yesterday we got a new poll from ELAB saying that they've been asked about the coalitions. Would like to see the centrist and the right working together? Would they like to see centrist plus right plus left working together? And the same situation, actually, like no single coalition gets more than 50% adhesion of the people, you know? So we don't really know exactly which coalition will work together or be able to work together, and what the French people expect from which coalition working together, actually. So I just think like once again, in so many countries, like groups and coalitions are able to merge and work together. Here we don't have this tradition of making compromises between groups and blocks. So right now they are having discussions, the new elected members of parliament and groups, whether and how they could work together. But so far what we can see is that they are not willing to work together. Like the left coalition says, we want to apply only our program. The right party said, like, we will not work with anyone else. The extreme right are like, we have the majority, I mean, we have the highest number of seats, so it is more legitimate for us to have the power. And the central party right now is reduced, even though the president is central. We may have the situation that happened by the past, once again, of having the president of one party and the parliament from another party. But once again, the majority was clear at the parliament. This is not the case. So the discussions are ongoing. The groups are currently forming at the parliament. So we don't know yet the outcome of the negotiations, but the public opinion is about that. It's very diverse.
Yes, it's apparently new moment in French democracy and in the French way of functioning and leading the country. what I have to ask at the moment is that still there is no deal between the winning party on the question who will be the next prime minister. I could hear from my colleagues from another media that there were misunderstanding between them inside the coalition. So there is a possibility that they may not be able to make a government or to choose a prime minister. So what will happen in this case? How much time do they have according to French laws to come up with a solution or to make agreement between them, and what will happen if they don't come to an agreement about the next prime minister?
That is all about the question. It's a brand new situation. You're right. There is no really constitutional time frame regarding the constitution of a government. What we know, what we've been taught from yesterday only, is that you know that on Monday the Prime Minister Gabriel Attal gave his resignation to the president. The president didn't accept the resignation of the Prime Minister, so his government. We know from yesterday that on the 17th of July, the government will be resigning, but at the same time, it would remain a caretaker government. The 17th of July is not an anecdotal date. It means it is because on the 18th of July, at the National Parliament, the National Assembly, the groups will have to vote for the election members of the institutions within the chamber, which is like the president of the National Assembly, president of commissions, of committees, what we call the questeurs, which are three members of parliament that are ruling a bit on the administrative process of the National Assembly. So that starts on 18th of July. And we have about 15 ministers that got elected or re-elected as members of parliament from the central party, of course, from Macron's party. So, of course, we don't need, the central party needs the vote of this MP ministers. If they are still in the government, they cannot vote. If they are part of a caretaker government, they can vote for the institution of these chambers. So what is more logical is that, what is more clear, let's say for the next weeks, is that we will have this caretaker government from 18th of July onwards. Yesterday, Emmanuel Macron sent a letter to the French people, and he said that he asks to the political parties that recognize themselves in the Republican institutions, the rule of law, parliamentarism, the European orientation, the defense of the French independence, sincere and loyal dialogue to build together a solid majority, which has to be plural for the country. So that is the expectation of our president. So he says in a way like, no, the elections are done. You have to discuss, guys, between each other, between the groups, and make something out of it and give me a suggestion of a prime minister that will be, let's say, more satisfactory for the whole groups, for all groups. And that's the real tricks. That's the real challenge. And so that's, once again, the ongoing discussions. They have to figure out between the parties how to work together and who to propose as a prime minister.
Are there any names circling around about the new prime minister?
Actually, some parties are about to give some names, we know that the left wing, most likely by tomorrow or else, they will give some names. Also, maybe at the central majority, they will give some names very soon. But once again, what is more urgent in a way is the nomination of the MPs that will take responsibilities at the National Assembly. And I'm telling you that because it's also a vote between the MPs, you know. So we'll figure out how the MPs will vote for whom, and we'll see which kind of consensus is going out first of this internal vote at the National Parliament, you know. So we'll assess like the political powers and alliances that are starting to build themselves within the Parliament. You know, so we'll have a first overview or indications on which kind of alliances may work together as a government, right? So that is how we stand right now.
So in all of this situation after the European election, maybe even before the European election, because it was also a huge campaigns in all of the countries, member countries of the European Union. So, and of course in European Union there is also a turnover in a way, because there is a rise of far right. So did that anyhow influence the opinion of the people about the voting inside the country, inside in France, or there is some satisfaction or unsatisfaction even prior to European Union election process?
Well, I would say that since 2022, since the outcome of the first parliamentary elections, we saw that once again the presidential party did not gain the absolute majority. So that was a first signal of the French people towards the President Macron, which was you have now to be able to make coalitions together, to find agreements together with other parties, because no, we are not giving you the absolute majority. And let's say that this did not really happen. There have been some attempts, but like a consensus have not been found for so many bills during this time, during this last 2 years. And with the government had and the prime minister at the time, most of all, Elisabeth Borne, had to adopt bills, to make adopting bills by using the Article 49.3 of the Constitutions, which says like the bills adopted without the vote of the parliamentary members, but we give our responsibility back to you. So there's been some votes, which we call motion de censure, which the MPs decide to make the government fall down or not. And one attempt was got failed by only 9 votes, which was very short. So we could see since 2022 that there's been some instability in the parliamentary process. And that is why Emmanuel Macron wanted a clarification, right? Because he saw that like at the European elections, his party was coming on the 3rd position, quite low. And so he said, let's clarify all this. As we just say, like the clarification is not that clear, actually. It's once again a very new situation. So it will all depend on what will happen in the next months, all about the negotiations, the coalitions. Maybe it will not happen. Maybe no party will manage to find a coalition to find discussions together. Maybe we'll have to reform even the constitutions. Who knows? Really, this is a real momentum in the French politics, and that's what makes it very interesting. At the same time, we can see that it has some repercussions on the European level, as you said, because our party, the Renew party at the European Parliament, got lower in its importance because we lost MPs from 23 to 13. And at the same time, we can see that Marine Le Pen's party, coalition at the European Parliament, decided to make a new party with Orban's MPs and allies, which gives a clear movement of what she's expecting, right? And she's getting further from the Republic. She's getting closer, let's say, to Russia and to her allies. So this is very clear. This is a political clarification. That's what we got. Like during the campaign, also during only 3 weeks of campaign, we've got like so many events happening within the political parties themselves. We saw the right wing, Les Républicains. We saw their president making a separation, a coalition, an agreement with Marine Le Pen party, which would never happen before. At the same time, within Éric Zemmour, which is very extreme right wing, Éric Zemmour's party, we saw a couple of members, newly elected European members of parliament, led by Marion Maréchal Le Pen, getting back to the Rassemblement National, which is Marine Le Pen party. We saw this coalition of all left-wing parties getting together once again. There has been an attempt already in 2022. It worked only for the election. During the session, they separated in groups. This most likely will happen once again within this new legislature. We don't know yet, but most likely, because we understood that it was just a coalition for an electoral coalition. And Macron apparently did not expect these left coalitions to get back so quick together, despite their clear difference. in their work, in their opinions, in their programs, but they've done it, right? So once again, like, this is in a way the clarification that the president was talking about, let's say, masks that are getting down. So that makes it more clear for the French people as well, I think.
So can we expect some kind of change in the course or in the international politics and towards international issues about what's happening inside of France? For example, will the same the same attitude remain the same actually about the questions like EU enlargement, dealing with the war in Ukraine, or helping Ukraine, or sanctioning Russia? Because European leaders during these European elections, we saw that they are on a very, very different points in their politics. So whatever happens in France, what will that mean for the foreign policy of France and foreign impact of France activities?
Yes, that's a very good question that we're already having during the elections. And of course, once again, we cannot answer to that, because it all depends on the outcome of these negotiations, coalitions and government that will be in place. That's why the president decided to send this letter yesterday to the French people, and obviously to the political leaders, saying that, like, you have to belong to the rule of law, you have to respect Republican institutions, you have to get a European orientation, right? So the president is expecting that, but, like, we don't really know what will happen about these negotiations. So it really depends on the outcome of the new government and the new coalitions and the new negotiations. What I can say is that, once again, during last weeks, we got this clarification regarding the parties. We know which party now is expecting what regarding the international relations. We don't really know, once again, whether they will be negotiating between each other within the same program that they agreed during the campaign or not. So we have an idea of who wants what, if I may say, on the international level and the enlargement and stuff, but we don't really know the outcome. It's really like very blurry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vasquez. And now I would like to use your calling at the moment to ask you some questions about my country. You was on a mission in Skopje. You have connections with this region. I saw that you also was on missions in Podgorica and Sarajevo. So you know this region very well, and all of the problems we have around here, mainly with our neighbors. I mean, each country has different problems with different neighbors. But I'm going to ask you about Macedonian problems, specifically at this point, the problems we have with Bulgaria. After the veto, the threat of veto, there was one, we call it a French proposal in here. Somehow it got the name French proposal because it was mainly presented by the French president, Mr. Macron. So tell me, what do you think about this proposal? Because the situation here and the support towards this proposal are not on a very high level here in Macedonia. Plus, we have a new government who still who thinks that it is renegotiable, this thing with Bulgaria. But again, there is this French proposal who in fact will have to be renegotiated if something like that is allowed for the Macedonian and Bulgarian government.
Yes. That's a very interesting question. Of course, as you mentioned, I lived in the region before for several years. I also speak some of the language, but I don't know if I apologize for making this interview in Macedonian language. But I've been observing many elections. I'm an electoral expert for the OSCE, that's correct. I was observing the last elections in North Macedonia, and I was also managing and participating to election campaigns also in France lately. So this is a very interesting question. As you say, the French agreement has been proposed by the French government because it was under the presidency of France of the European Council. So that was I think, let's say, the best agreement in a way for North Macedonia to further advance in our path to accessing to the European Union, because the situation has been blocked for decades. It has been a candidate since 2003, as you know, and blocked by Greece, and then, as you said, a bit of France and then a bit of Bulgaria, and for the reasons for so many decades. So that was, like I say, the most concrete, I would say, proposal to advance this process, because I strongly personally think that North Macedonia has its way and its place to belong to the European Union, and I really hope, I sincerely hope that this process will go further. We know that the discussions and negotiations have been opened lately by the European Commission, so now it's time for negotiations. The outcome of the last elections in North Macedonia was clear. They sent a message to the ruling party, the SDSM at the time, that they have been maybe too far away in the process, I mean, in the compromises that were needed for this process. And so I think that there is a need to respect the will of the people, but at the same time, it's a very inextricable situation. So this leads, like here, if I may say, if I may make a parallel, it's all about compromises and how far we are able to go, and this is a clear clarification, if I may say. So, of course, North Macedonia leaders have to respect the opinion of its people that voted for them, and that's about the choice of the people. That's about democracy, but at the same time, we have to go further on compromises and dialogue to build together a clearer and a stronger future for our countries and for European Union.
Mr. Vasquez, thank you very much for finding time to address my viewers. At the very end, I would like to ask you, is there anything you miss from Skopje?
I miss Macedonian wines, of course. I miss Ivar a lot. Miss the Macedonian cheese sometimes as well. There are some shops in France, in Paris, where you can find, but it's always better to get back to North Macedonia to find directly. And of course, my friends there, I miss them really so much.
Well, you have an open invitation. You can visit us and maybe join me in my studio live next time you're visiting this region. Thank you very much for your...
Благодарам и на вас. Thank you. Again, I really appreciate you finding time for explaining what is happening inside of France. I mean, France is one of the most important countries inside the Union, especially when it comes to enlargement. So us from this region, we really need to know what is going on and what is happening in your country in order to understand your policy towards enlargement process and much more than that. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Lavirint продолжува да ви носи ексклузивни известувања и увид во најважните работи што се случуваат во светот, а кои секако дека и нас не засегаат и покрај тоа што сме мала држава. Ви благодарам за вниманието со кој не следевте и овој пат. Се надевам ви дадовме подетален увид за она што се случува на НАТО самитот во Вашингтон, но и за она што се случува во Париз за нивната внатрешна политика. Останете со програмата на ID Media, гледајте и читајте ID, а со мене во Лавиринт се гледаме повторно следната недела. Довидување.